Well, welcome to TNT, everybody. We are already in the month of August. So it's August 2nd, 2022. And I'm excited for what we're getting into. Well, we've started at the last couple of weeks, but we're going to take another big jump forward tonight. And I'm excited about this because I know what this realization has done for me in my life over the last few years as I was learning this information. So I'm excited to share it with you guys because I'd like it to, like to share it and have it start making a difference in other people's lives as well. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about how our thoughts and emotions interact with and affect our physical well-being. Positive thoughts and positive emotions bring health and wholeness to our bodies. Negative thoughts, negative emotions do just the opposite. I mean, our bodies, our spirits, our souls, our thoughts, our emotions, they're all intertwined. That's how the Lord created us. So tonight, we're going to take another step deeper into that process to look at how some of those thought patterns develop in us. And there are different ways that thought patterns can develop in us. But I'm going to kind of give it an overview, and then you will have to personalize how it affects you. And before we do that, I want to remind you of two of our foundational verses, because these are really, really important when we're talking about this information. And the first one, and we've talked about these before, Proverbs 23, verse 7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And Proverbs 4:23, so they're both in the book of Proverbs. And this one is in the Passion or the NLT version. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. I'm going to read that again. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Not your intellectual thoughts, not taking control of everything around you. Guard what goes into your heart. Another translation says, for out of it is the wellspring, for out of it flows the wellspring of life. In other words, everything emanates from what your heart believes. Everything in your life, for it determines the course of your life. God doesn't determine the course of your life. Your enemies don't determine the course of your life. Your own heart determines the course of your life. Now, I don't want that to be discouraging. I don't want you to think, oh, great. I don't know how to change it then. I don't know how to deal with this. If I'm the one that has to fix it, I don't know what to do. That's the whole reason we're talking, is I want to walk through a process over the next couple of weeks that's laying the groundwork for you to take this process onto yourself and be able to do exactly that, to go in and determine what's in your heart that you don't even realize is there, causing the rest of your life to be what it is. But then, okay, how do I go in? How do I bring the fullness of God's promises in there so that becomes what is directing my life? Okay. And I think I've used this analogy before, but if you haven't heard this one before, I want to share this one because this determines, oh, my dog just pushed my door open. She wanted to come in and say hi. Hi, Molly. Oh, great. And she is right in the doorway, so I can't close the door. Okay, well, I guess Molly will join us tonight too. Anyway, the wax that you can use to seal the back of an envelope, like you take a little spoonful of warm wax and put it on the envelope, and then take a stamp of some kind that has a design in it. And while the wax is warm, you put that stamp on the wax, and then the wax cools and hardens with that design in it. Do you all know what I'm talking about when I say that? Okay. That's kind of how our hearts develop. When we are young, from the time we're born, actually from the time we're conceived, because things go into our hearts even at conception, which we're going to talk about that part of the puzzle next week. But even at conception, up through about age 12, somewhere right in there, that our heart is like that warm, soft wax. Okay, that what we experience, what we hear, the words that are spoken to us, the things that happen to us, the things that we say, the things that we do, all of that combines and becomes the pattern that goes on our hearts. And because that our brainwave patterns are slower for those first dozen years or so, that's why these thoughts are able to enter into our heart and become our reality. They become like the hard drive of our computer. It becomes what drives us, what directs us. That's why he says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. So once we reach about the age of 12 or so, our brainwave pattern starts picking up speed, except when we're sleeping at night. During the day, we're operating at a delta brainwave pattern instead of a slower, like alpha brainwave pattern when we're sleeping at night, or beta or alpha. Or delta when we're sleeping, and alpha at night, and then beta when we're awake during the day. Those things that we hear and experience as a young child become the pattern for our life. The way the Lord designed the world to work, he wanted us to have these wonderful, perfect parents, Adam and Eve in the garden, everything's great. And so what we experience, what we put on our hearts is the Lord's word, his love, everything positive and wonderful. And if any of you had a childhood where everything was perfect, please raise your hand. I did not. I don't think any of us did. So instead of all of the positive good things and the Lord's word being and his love being the primary thing that got put on our heart, everything that we experienced as a child became that pattern on our heart. So as we get older, guess what? The thoughts, the emotions, the everything we garnered as a child becomes our hard drive for life. Okay. Now, as we're going to go through this tonight, this does not give us permission to blame anyone for what has happened to us when we were a child. Okay, well, they said that to me, they did that to me, so it's their fault I am the way I am. No, this whole teaching is to help us learn how to take responsibility for our own healing. Okay, because most of what happened to us as a child was, our immediate family or schools or church, neighborhood, friends, whatever. Could have been strangers, could have been some outside things. But for the vast majority, we know where the input came from. In fact, the things that have been done or said throughout our lives they're the things that we have said and done, would you believe, have impacted other people in ways that we absolutely have no idea how we've impacted them. We might have said something or did something with no evil intent at all, but it ended up hurting somebody and we didn't know it. Our parents, our friends, our family, whatever, could have done the same thing to us growing up, and it hurt us. We took it in a certain way, and they had no intention of doing that. Sometimes they did have an intention, which is sad, but this is not about trying to figure out who is at fault. This is to say, wait a minute, this is pretty cool, because it doesn't matter who is at fault. The Lord has given us a process to heal from it, period. We don't have to find the source of the blame. So as we discover some of the sources of how negative things have developed in our lives, the first thing we need to do is to send away any sense of blame or offense. In other words, forgive. So as we're going through all of this and you realize, oh, you know what? Now I understand the way I think this way or do this because mom did this when I was a kid, or dad did this, or Uncle Harry did this, or whoever happened, this happened or whatever. So it's their fault. No, we don't blame them. That may give us some deeper understanding, but first thing we do is, it's okay. I don't need to blame them. I forgive them. I'm going to deal with the situation. Just me and the Lord, we're going to get this figured out. And I send the offense away. I release them from any responsibility as far as having to fix this for me, because this is between me and the Lord now at this point. We don't have any idea what their motive or thought processes were behind anybody's action. So that is, you don't need to know their motive. You don't need to know the why. You don't need to know any of that in order to forgive them. You just say, you know what, Lord, you've got me now. We're going to fix this. So I'm letting them off the hook. I forgive them. That's crucial. And I want that to be an underlying motivation or process for you through this whole thing. Okay. Using this analogy, we had a house in our neighborhood. Well, it was actually next door to us. And for years, it was the oldest house in the neighborhood. It had actually been a farmhouse before they started building these newer homes here. And they just moved it onto the lot next to us. So anyway, over the years, from the 50s forward, there were different owners, and it never had a good owner. It was really kind of sad. And so every owner, up until just a few years ago, did really destructive things to that house, to the point where I don't remember how many years ago, 6, 7 years ago or whatever, I thought they were going to have to tear that house down because it was so bad. And it was, I don't know who did what to make it, the roof leak, this happened, that happened. Here's the point of all of that. It wasn't about going back and finding out who did this to the house at this point, who did this to the house. Well, they're responsible for this, so they have to fix that and blah, blah. No, the whole point was, doesn't matter at this point. Let's just go in and fix the house. Okay, that's what we're going to do here. We are going to go in and fix the house of our hearts. And it doesn't necessarily matter who did what. You may discover some things along the way, but use that as a point of forgiveness and not blame. That's got to be so foundational here. Okay, so if we seem stuck in any area of our lives, if we seem to have the same kinds of things happening repeatedly over the course of our life, does that speak to anybody? That you run into the same issues over and over and over the course of your life, or the same emotions, or the same struggles? Most assuredly, as Proverbs 4:23 says, the issue is not from what's going on around us. It is our own heart beliefs being played out in our life. It's our own heart beliefs being played out. Now, please don't get discouraged with that, because this is exciting. We can learn how to go in and find those heart beliefs and change them to line up with all of the Lord's promises and his provision. Okay, if you were having to deal with other people out there and go fix them in order for you to be fixed, that would be an impossible journey. That would be discouraging. This doesn't have to be discouraging. This is this is encouraging because the only person I have to deal with is me. And the Lord will work with me to fix that. Everybody is frozen on their screen. So can you just like pop okay, Rebecca, I just saw yours move. That's good. Okay, I'm sitting here going, is everybody okay? Because nobody's moving. Everybody's okay. All right. Okay, Lita just popped up too, so that's good. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you some examples from situations that I have been familiar with people that I've encountered or worked with or whatever, no names, obviously, and some examples from my own life to help you get an idea of how this can play out. Okay. This lady, she was an only child. Her mom and dad had a pretty rocky relationship. Her mom was a very gorgeous, elegant woman. The dad was a businessman, and he was a hard worker and successful, but he was also, okay, Alan Romero. I don't know who that is. Okay. But her dad was very abusive to the mom. Okay. Out in public, they looked like the shining couple. At home, he was extremely abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, just really not good at all. Okay. And so guess what? Even though intellectually she wanted a really good relationship with, she wanted a romantic, a wonderful romantic relationship. And in her head, she had the idea formed of what a great relationship would be like. All of her dating relationships and her marriage relationship, guess what? She got tangled up with, even though these guys look great on the outside, and she thought, okay, I found a good one. They all ended up being abusive to her. And the last one, after years of abuse, he finally broke, and he did go get treatment, and they turned things around, but it was after many years of abuse. So that pattern that she saw as a little girl became the pattern. And this is where quantum physics comes into play too, which we're not going to get deep in the weeds on that tonight. But your heart literally vibrates at a frequency that draws that matching frequency to it. So her heart pattern as a little girl said, oh, the husband is abusive to the wife. And so that became the pattern in her heart that drew that abuse to her, even though in her mind, she knew that is not what she wanted. Okay. Another example of a young lady who grew up in an alcoholic home, and she was bound and determined, I am breaking out of this. I am never going to marry anybody like this. My life will be different, blah, 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 blah. Guess what she was drawn into without even realizing it? An alcoholic relationship. Because there again, the pattern on her heart said this is what life looks like. And because she hadn't resolved that yet, it drew her into that pattern. And she had no way to get out of it. There are some things that might not be as blatant as that on the surface. I'm just going to give you a couple examples for myself, so maybe it will trigger in you some patterns that you go, oh, okay. And I grew way into my adulthood, in fact, way, way, way into my adulthood until just the last few years. Whenever I would hear somebody plan a vacation, or they talk about, oh, they're getting ready to go here and they're going there and they're planning this vacation for 6 months from now and 2 years from now and blah, 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 I would think, on the inside, I was going, wow, that is really cool. I wonder, I mean, how can they do that? Oh, excuse me, let me close my door here. Sorry, my dog has to, keep track of everybody in the neighborhood. Anyway, I would hear, how can people plan a vacation like that? Don't they feel guilty about taking time off from work? And how do they know what's going to be happening at that point in time that they can plan a vacation? And how can they spend that kind of money and just plan on going and doing something like that? And I always wanted to have that freedom of being able to plan a vacation, but my insides would just clench up at the thought of doing that. And I'm going, why can they do that so easily, but I can't? Well, I didn't understand this process until, over the last dozen years or so, 10 years. So anyway, this was one of the things that popped up for me just a few years ago. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start working on this one. And I took myself through the process that I'm going to share with you later. And here's what I uncovered. Now, you'd think it would be right up front in my head, but not until I did some heart work did I realize, oh, now my mom and dad were hardworking, successful people. Dad was a banker and he worked for other businesses around town, kept books for them. My mom was a bookkeeper, on and on, hardworking people. But for them, work was everything. They wouldn't, if they took time off for a vacation, it was from Friday through Sunday, and we would drive somewhere real quick for a short weekend and come back. And we would do that maybe once a year, but we didn't do that every year. And they, they had to work right up until we were going to drive out of the driveway. And then as soon as we got back home, man, they were right back to work. And everything was just this short and condensed little, there was just this feeling of, well, I guess, we got to stick a vacation in here. And we wouldn't do fun things on the vacation. We would just do what mom and dad wanted to do. And my sister and I kind of tagged along. It was just very strange. And of course, mom and dad being well-respected people in the community, I assumed, well, if that's what they say and that's their perspective, then it must be right, because they're well respected by other people in the community. And you equate in your heart your parents' authority with the Lord's authority. So you combine the two and you go, oh, well, then that must be what the Lord says is appropriate. So guess what my heart took on? Linda, it's not right when these people are taking this vacation time to go and do something, just go and have fun. That's frivolous. That's not right. You shouldn't be doing that. You're wasting time. You're wasting money. That's not an appropriate use of your time and money. That's what was under the surface. It wasn't right there blatantly out in front. But as I went through this process, I went, wait a minute. It's okay to take a vacation. When you're working hard and you want to go just take a break, it's okay. And it doesn't have to be a working vacation, because then I realized that the trips that I had taken had all been connected with work at some point in fashion. If I went home to visit my parents, I had to work and get a lot done for them while I was there. If I was going to take a different vacation, well, I had to take it in conjunction with a trip. With a business trip, so that I was getting, we have someone else who just is joined. There we go. So I had to do it in conjunction with a business trip that had the idea of just going and having fun was not allowed in my heart, because that's the pattern I grew up with. Okay, is that starting to resonate with you? Um, let's see. Let me look at one and just here's another. Oh, here's another one. I would start, we have somebody new joining us, Belinda in Washington, or Belinda Washington, I guess is her name. She's not in Washington, it's Belinda Washington. Belinda, welcome. We're in the middle tonight. We're talking about heart beliefs. I will be posting this recording on YouTube when we're done under the name Linda Cooze, Cooze. I'll type it here in the chat. And so if you want to go back and catch the beginning of it, you will do that. Hang on while I just type YouTube here. There we go. Anyway, we're talking about heart patterns and how they're formed when we're a child and how they affect us as an adult, and how we are going to learn how to take the Lord into the midst of those heart patterns and heal from them. So here is another one. Again, because they were so work oriented, especially my mom would have a tendency to, well, let me lay the groundwork here. We never worried about food or clothing or shelter or the basics. Those were provided very basically. I mean, they're not extravagantly by any stretch of the imagination, but we never had to worry about those. But extra fun things were considered frivolous, or they would get in the way of the work. For example, we lived out in the country and we would always drive by the public swimming pool at the park in town. And I'd see all these kids in there all summer long playing there year after year after year. So finally, and Mom knew that my sister and my older sister and I wanted to go and hang out at the pool. But it was never allowed until one summer. She finally promised us she was going to take us. And she picked the day, and my sister and I were ready to go, by 11 o'clock in the morning. And we waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And she was working and doing bookwork and working and doing bookwork and working. Finally about 1:30, 1:45, she came outside kind of huffing like, well, I guess if we're going to do this. And by then the clouds had started to roll in, and way off in the distance, she heard some thunder. And she goes, well, we can't go today because it's thundering and lightning. And she closed the car door again, went back in the house, and my sister and I just sat there. Well, she had a habit of doing that kind of thing, promising something that she knew we wanted, and then at the last minute finding an excuse why she couldn't make it work. And so there was this pattern constantly of getting excited, kind of like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, you get all excited, like, yay, finally. And then at the last minute, she would pull the rug out from under us and we wouldn't get to do what we wanted to do. And then it was never offered again. So as an adult, whenever I would want to attempt something kind of out of the box, something fun, something new, something challenging, something unique, I would get all excited about it. And then as I get closer to doing it, guess what my heart would do? My heart would start feeling that disappointment again, that it was going to be taken away from me, which would trigger thoughts of it's going to be pulled away. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And so I would begin to get discouraged even before I would get up to the point. And guess what? They always crashed, fell through, didn't happen, whatever. And it wasn't anybody's fault but my own heart beliefs, because of the pattern that had been set up, that my own heart and my own emotions were causing things to crater in front of me. I'm just going to do one more example. One year, my dad finally said that we were going to go on a long vacation. And he was going to take all kinds of time off from the bank because he had so much vacation time piled up because he never took vacation. He had weeks and weeks piled up, and he said, we're just going to go, and we're going to be gone as long as we want, 3-4 weeks, whatever we want to do. We were going to drive from North Dakota up into Canada and do all this fun stuff. My sister and I were so excited we could hardly stand it. We had all these big plans. We brought our swimsuits, but we never got to go near a swimming pool. So anyway, that's another story.
Oh.
But here's how our long vacation ended up. We left on a Monday morning. We drove to Calgary, which was almost 800 miles. And we went to Calgary, went to the zoo in Calgary. We did do that. Drove up to Banff National Park. Now we couldn't go see the things in Banff National Park because we could see them from the road. So yeah, see that? There it is. And we're going, drove back through Glacier National Park. The car never even slowed down. We drove through the park, never stopped to see anything in Glacier. Visited some of my dad's friends in Helena, Montana, spent the night in Glendive, Montana with my aunt and uncle and cousin, and we were back home by Sunday afternoon. So we had left on a Monday morning and we're home by Sunday afternoon, and we had driven all of those hundreds and hundreds of miles and never got to do anything. So the vacation was like, oh, well, guess what that planted in my heart? Not just for vacations, but for anything that I would get excited about. Yeah, those same feelings would come up and I would end up sabotaging things on my own because those feelings were still in my heart. They had become heart beliefs that this is how what life looks like. You're promised things, but you're never going to get them. You cannot receive the promises of God if your own heart is telling you you can't count on the promises coming through. It wasn't God not fulfilling the promises. It was my own heart preventing them from being fulfilled in my life. Remember our verse? Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. That little girl had developed that heart belief. Well, promises aren't for you. And even if somebody promises, oh, well, they're not going to follow through. They're going to disappoint. That became the hard drive for my life until I found out about how to go in and deal with these issues. There is not one issue you can't deal with in your life if you look in your own heart. You don't have to fix the people around you. You don't have to fix circumstances. It's dealing with your own heart. And this is not a process. It's not about convincing God to do something for you. We've talked about this in Ephesians in explicit detail, everything we've covered. The Lord has already given every gift. He has already given every blessing. He has already done everything. This process is about learning to go into your heart and see where your heart limitations are, what your limiting heart beliefs are, you sending them away, and then believing God's truth in your heart in its place. And it is revolutionary. It is revolutionary. It will it will change your relationships. It will change your finances. It will change your work status. It will change everything because, again, our verse, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of life. Okay, so let me see. I'm getting off on my notes here. Okay, now, how do other people pursue things and become successful and do the things that I wanted to do? And why couldn't I? I'm not dumb. I'm not incapable. I'm not any of those things. I was just frozen in a very limiting heart belief pattern. And it certainly was not the Lord limiting me. He did not limit me. It was me limiting me. And you remember the term that I shared several weeks ago, and I shared it a couple of times, the word circumstance theology? Here's what circumstance theology is. It's when we don't understand something that's happening, and so we create a theology based on our own lack of understanding. And we say, like, oh, if people can't get healing, for example, then they'll say, well, the Lord gave me this illness so that they could teach me something, or that he could teach me something. No, 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 no. That's circumstance theology. You can't understand why you're not getting healed. So you go, well, God must be doing this because I can't get healed. That's circumstance theology. And when we do not realize that it is our own heart limiting us, we can often fall into creating false theology or circumstance theology in an attempt to justify, why is God holding out on me? It's not God holding out on you, not at all. It's something inside. And like I said before, that's exciting because we don't have to fix other people. We don't have to figure out how to fix all this other circumstances. We can go on a journey into our own hearts and find the healing. The God who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing, who has given us everything for life, Zoe life and godliness, who has already said yes to every promise, who sent Jesus to save us because he loved us so much, is all of a sudden going to start withholding blessings out of our lives? No. No, 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 no. Again, Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And guard well your heart because it affects everything in your life. So how do we find out what is buried in there that is putting a limit on our lives and causing us to experience the same lack over and over and over and over again? Here we go. Now, this process I am going to mention, it's like peeling an onion. This is not a one and done and we fix everything in one 10-minute shot. Literally, the peeling the onion is the best analogy I can think of. You get one layer kind of taken, you know, you go through this process with the Lord and you go, oh, okay. And then that softens the next part of your heart, and he helps you discover there, and you go, oh, now I see how those two are tied together. Because if he did everything at one time, it would be too overwhelming. We wouldn't be able to grab hold of what he was teaching us. It would be like, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. Because I now see the journey that I went through with each one of these beliefs, and I go, oh, okay, he gently guides you one step at a time that as you are ready to deal with it. Okay, he's never going to push you ahead of what you're dealing with. Now, you're ready to deal with. Now, we've talked about this psalm a lot, but this is basically the process, a good psalm to use to process this. And this time in Psalm 139, I'm going to add verses 1 and 2, as well as 23 and 24. And it says, Lord, you know everything that there is to know about me. He knows more about us than I know about us. I didn't realize those limiting beliefs were there until he walked me through it. You perceive every movement of my heart and soul, and you understand my every thought before it even enters my mind. He understands every thought before it enters my mind. All those limiting beliefs that I had in my heart, he understood them before I ever thought them. He knew them before I thought them. He understood them. He got it. So guess where we're going to go to get help with dealing with these things? Verses 23 and 24 in the Passion Translation. That's the translation that I love. God, I invite your searching gaze into my heart. Examine me through and through. Find out everything that may be hidden within me. Put me to the test and sift through all my anxious cares. See if there is any path of pain I'm walking on. In other words, Linda, Lord, what's going on inside of my heart that I'm limiting myself? What path of pain am I walking on that I don't get it, that I haven't figured out? And it says, and lead me back to your glorious, everlasting way, the path that brings me back to you. If it brings me back to him, it brings me back to every one of his blessings, to his love, to his strength, to his power, everything. He's the one that's going to walk us through this process, and no one else can define this process for you. I mean, I can kind of give you some guidance as how you might go about doing this, but what you uncover is going to be unique to just you. Nobody else travels the exact journey that you do. That's why it has to be done with the Holy Spirit. It is vitally important that before starting into this process, that there is absolutely no doubt that the Lord has already supplied everything for every blessing, that it is simply a matter of you learning how to connect with it, you learning how to receive it. The word receive in the New Testament, the underlying Greek word, actually means to grab hold of it. So for you to grab hold of it, you have to realize it's there. So I want to emphasize that again. That's what we've been going over all these weeks, is there is no doubt every provision for every need that you have: spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, financial, relationship, on and on and on and on. He has provided for every need, and he is not withholding it from you. He has already said yes to every promise. It's up to us to say the amen. Okay, Lord, bring it on. Okay? That has to be the foundation that you go into this process with. So here is, and now next week we're going to cover even an additional source of where these issues might be coming from, because now we're going to go back even generations and how prior generations can affect who you are. And that's another whole gamut. But guess what? The process doesn't change. The Lord knew every one of your ancestors too, and knew every thought. He knew everything about every one of them. But I want you to have an understanding of how those things can affect you physically, emotionally, in every way, and how it can affect your heart beliefs. So that's what we're going to cover next week. But for this week, I am going to encourage you to take those verses in Psalm 139, verses 1 and 2 and 23 and 24, and just start the process of saying, okay, Lord, here is a limiting factor that I see playing out in my life over and over again. I have felt this same hurtful emotion over and over in my life. I have encountered this same struggle in this area of my life over and over again, and I don't know how to deal with it. Start journaling those issues. Okay, hi Misha. Okay, start journaling those issues, ladies, so that as we get into this process, you will have already started that, and ask the Lord to make you aware of those issues. Don't be afraid of them. This is exciting. This is victory time. This is, you mean finally I can start getting past what has held me up all these years? It's exciting. So start journaling. And then next week, we're going to add into all of this mix how our ancestors have impacted us through the process of cellular memory. And that's another whole thing. I'm not going to get into it. That's a big one. Now, 2 weeks from tonight, we are going to have communion. So I want to give you a couple of weeks to just make a note of that. So 2 weeks from tonight, have a cup of, have some juice, or and a cracker or a piece of bread, or if you want wine, whatever, something that you can be prepared to take communion with, so we can take communion together 2 weeks from tonight. So I will remind you again next week. So with that, I am going to stop the recording and we can go into a time of sharing